Hello, this is Socially Triggered, and this video is going to be on whether or not the minimum wage and minimum wage laws are actually socialist in their nature. And I want to address this question because it's a really kind of fundamental question that is usually debated by those on the right and those on the left. Those people on the right generally want no minimum wage laws. If you're far to the right, you want more personal freedom. And personal freedom comes with responsibility. So that means that generally you want a free market. And a free market means that people, they have the ability to succeed, but they also have the ability to fail. And that is a pretty major freedom that has huge responsibilities. And those people on the left generally have the exact opposite kind of belief. They want the government to control, to protect, to create like a safety net, to really protect all the citizens. And this is why they encourage minimum wage laws. Now they're even going further with it, with living wage laws. And the idea is to protect everyone because they can't protect themselves. And this is a real problem with minimum wage laws, that there is no minimum. It seems like there's going to be a minimum, and it just constantly goes up because there's so many circumstances. And once you get into this concept of living wage, well, then it could keep on rising. And what happens with minimum wage is that if you create a minimum wage, then basically you're setting the lowest possible amount that a company can hire somebody at, which sounds like a good thing to potential employees. But what it does is it sets a bar, it sets a standard for what those employees can, what the employer can charge for that work, or what the employees can charge for their labor. I'm not really phrasing that the greatest, but the point is it sets a minimum standard. So let's say minimum wage is $10, okay, just a number I'm throwing out there. And that labor is only worth $5. Well, what you can do as an employer, you don't hire somebody that's a rookie. Because you're only going to get your $5 worth of labor and you're paying 10. You're going to lose money. It doesn't make sense. So what you're going to do is you're going to hire more seasoned workers that are worth $10 an hour because they can do twice as much work as that rookie could do. So what you do is by creating that minimum wage, you're setting about a bar to what level the employees have to be at in order to be worthy of being paid $10 an hour. Even if it's flipping burgers, even if it's like the most trivial of jobs, like washing floors or whatever, you actually will increase the bar for those entry-level jobs because the employer has to make it worth their while to actually hire those people. And you can hire people that are more seasoned and more skilled, and you can actually make it so that the minimum wage will work. However, what does that do? And what it does is it actually pushes those people that need that experience to enter the workplace. And so that's my issue with the minimum wage laws. That especially when I was first working, I really see it from that perspective because when I first started to work, I had no experience. I didn't know anyone in any companies. I had no nepotism that I could use or rely on to get a job, and I really had no way to get a job based on my resume. My resume was just nothing. There was nothing there. High school diploma, and then maybe when I was in university, it was like some universities, so it was like really a pathetic resume, and I didn't have anything to really justify anyone hiring me. So I needed that experience so that I could say, hey, look, I worked at this company or in this company, and that would be, give me the qualifications that I needed to get the job. But when there's a minimum wage, the standard went up. and I just couldn't meet the standard. So it was very frustrating when I was first starting in my young career. And I see that same frustration playing out in modern society. So why do I say that this is socialism? Socialism is the government control and the government ownership of private industry. There is no private industry. Everything's owned by the public. And there's steps that you can take towards that goal if you're trying to achieve a socialist society. A socialist society is ultimately the government controls all resources, and it owns everything. And individuals within that society have no ownership. Everything's owned in common. Usually the government owns it all. And there's steps that you can take towards that goal if you're trying to achieve socialism. One step is the gradual erosion of the free market and the controls that you can place on companies. And this can be simple things. It could be like regulations. It could be minimum wage laws, where you're basically trying to control the market. And so what happens is, as you set these controls, well, then you get more and more government influence within business. And if you can get enough government influence in business, then really you have what is ultimately government ownership or control of those business. So it might not be like full-on socialism day one, but it's a step towards that. So why are minimum wage laws so dangerous? I kind of expressed that early employment kind of element to it, but there's more to it than that. So right now, about 2% of the US and Canada labor force is receiving minimum wage. So 98% of all employees don't even get paid minimum wage. They get paid more, okay? Now the 2% that do get minimum wage, they are composed of a bunch of different groups. They're composed of students. They're composed of young individuals. They're composed of the elderly. And they're composed of people who are sort of in between, who actually depend on those minimum wage jobs because they have no real choice. They're very low skilled. They're very low, they might have very low capabilities, and they depend on those jobs to, just generate enough money to live on. And that's a very small segment of the 2% that actually are receiving minimum wage. So if you look at the majority of the people who are receiving minimum wage, it's the students and the elderly who are using this minimum wage as a supplement income. A lot of students, they still rely on their family, and they're also seeing this job as a first-time job, as an entry-level job. The elderly also are using it as a supplement to maybe their pensions that they receive, that the pension just doesn't cover all their costs, so they take this work as extra work, which can help supplement their income. Also, there's a lot of elderly. When you go to Florida, I visited Florida many times, and every time I'm just surprised by all the elderly working in stores, and it's not because they always need the money. It's because they just like to work. They like to get out and have something that they can do. So there's a bit of that as well. I think that's a small element, but it is there. So the point is that 2%, I think it's like maybe only 20% of that 2%. So we're talking like 0.4% of the whole labor force that actually relies on the minimum wage. So why do we even need that? It's not really that necessary. It's protecting like 0.4% of the whole labor force. It's a very small number. However, the danger of minimum wage is what it does do is it prevents jobs from being created. That's the bad thing. So let's say just creating a minimum wage decreases the number of jobs by 20% or 100%, because, and it can be that much, because what happens is, so I just got distracted there by the phone. I want to continue on. So what happens is, as I said, there could be a job loss from the fact that you have a minimum wage. Now, if anyone can set the minimum, if you can set your own value for work, then it really does create opportunities. Because let's say you're a small company, and you can't afford to hire somebody for $20, $30 an hour or $15 an hour, like they try to propose. But you can pay maybe $5 an hour. Now, some people don't want to work for $5 per hour. That's good. That's fair. They can work for whatever they want. But some people do want to work for $5, are willing to work for $5, because any money for them is a benefit. So that's the thing that happens with the free market. People can decide how much they're willing to pay or be paid for the work that they do. And the businesses and the employees basically come to a decision on how much the employees should be compensated. There's a back and forth. The employer wants to get the best price for the employee, and the employee wants to get the best price for themselves. So there's a auction of those services, and basically what happens is that ends up resulting in a salary. So what happens though is, if you have a minimum wage, you're basically removing that arbitration. You're removing the ability for people to decide freely what they're willing to work for. When I first started working, I was willing almost to work for free just to get the experience that I needed, but it was illegal to do so. So my point is, the opportunities that are lost are so much more damaging than the benefits of having a minimum wage. I really don't feel like there is many benefits to having a minimum wage, because, as I said, it doesn't really impact that many people. In fact, if we had no minimum wage, people always say, oh, then you'll have like the employers just charging slave labor wages. That's the most common argument that I hear. And it's just not true. It's just not true. It's like, as I said, it's only 4% that are even getting paid minimum wage. That means that the market is already determining the prices, and it's higher than the actual minimum wage. So what happens is, let's say it is slave labor. Like, let's say somebody is willing to work for free, which would be considered slave labor. That's actually not the case. Because, as I said, if it is always the individual's freedom within a free society, within a free market, to decide how much they're willing to work for. Now, if they say that number is zero, I'm willing to work for $0 per hour, they might see the value of getting a job as having a value to itself, where they say, hey, look, I need the experience. You have a job. I'm willing to work for free to prove myself, just to get that experience, so that later they can renegotiate their value and they can reset what they believe that they are worth. And people are willing to do that. That's why we have internships. They always say it's a form of slave labor, but it isn't, because what's happening is those people that are interns are getting the experience that they need in order to potentially get more value for their labor later on. So this is how the free market works. This is why we don't need minimum wage. And this is why minimum wage laws are really socialistic, because they are government control over the free market and over business. And that's a very dangerous place to be. And there's no real reason for it and no real benefit that's received from having these laws. And it's just really to make people feel good about something or other, but it doesn't really actually benefit anyone. And the problem is most people don't really understand minimum wage in a way that where they understand what the market implications of the minimum wage are. But it's a very dangerous step towards socialism. And it's a major step towards socialism because it does allow the control over the free market from governments. And you don't want to have that. Ultimately, you want to have a very free market because free markets mean free individuals within that society. So this has been Socially Triggered. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please check out my other videos, and thanks for listening.